A creek can kill faster than bullets. And tonight, it feels like it is waiting. The valley is all black shapes and wet air. A moonless pocket of mountain jungle where the canopy swallows what little light exists. Fog clings to the waterline, and a fast creek slices the terrain in half like a quiet warning. A naval special warfare SEAL platoon moves toward a landing zone for extraction after a sensitive grab. But the water is the problem now. Every step near the bank sounds too loud, and every splash feels like it could pull eyes and rifles out of the dark. The creek is not just noise. It is a spotlight made of sound. There is only one crossing. A shallow ford that dares them to choose wrong. If they rush it, the water will announce them with 100 sharp slaps. And if they hesitate, they will stack up in the open with nowhere to disappear. The canopy and broken ground kill visibility. And the creek forces hand signals and whisper short calls, because anything louder would carry. They start to commit anyway. Boots sliding on hidden rocks. Breath held tight behind clenched teeth. The team is trained for gunfire. But the creek turns simple movement into a slow trap. One step at a time. And the person who will save them will not be the one with the biggest weapon. It will be the one they still think of as just support. The platoon is coming off a grab that cannot end up on anyone's timeline. And that is why they are moving like ghosts. A naval special warfare SEAL platoon threads through the mountain jungle valley with helmets low and carbines tucked close, following a route that should lead to a helicopter landing zone. They keep light discipline. Screens dimmed and optics capped. Because even a glow under the canopy can feel like a flare to the wrong eyes. Their world is reduced to hand signals, careful footing, and the muted clack of gear wrapped in tape. Up front, the officer in charge, a lieutenant, checks the terrain against what he memorized before wheels up. Just behind him, the platoon chief manages the real pace, spacing the file so one burst cannot catch them all, and keeping everyone on noise discipline, counting steps in his head, watching for bunching and listening for anyone losing rhythm tonight. No one talks unless they have to. And when they do, it is a short, breathed-out phrase that gets eaten by the creek. Even the rear security moves like a metronome, head on a swivel, trusting the chief to keep the line from stretching or collapsing. The map and the ground agree on the worst part. The creek cuts across their route like a moving wall. And the only crossing is a shallow ford that looks harmless until you hear it. Rush it and the water will slap and splash like an alarm. But hesitate, and the platoon will bunch up on the bank where the canopy blocks sight lines and the fog makes distance feel wrong. The creek hides a whisper, but it also hides the cues that keep a team synced. So timing turns into guesswork. They pause just long enough for everyone to read the same problem in the same dark. The creek noise swallows anything more than whisper short calls. So the chief's hands do most of the talking and the lieutenant's nod is the decision. The extraction bird is somewhere out there on the clock, and the valley feels like it is tightening around them with each second they waste. Then, boots slide off mud into cold water, and the line commits, because turning back is not an option. In the middle of that line is Hospital Corpsman, First Class Rachel Kincaid, the platoon's Special Operations Independent Duty Corpsman. Most of the guys just call her Doc. And they say it the way you say something you depend on without thinking about it. She has prior Fleet Marine Force tours with Marine infantry in hard terrain. The kind of experience that teaches you what panic looks like before it reaches someone's face. She carries her medical kit like it is part of her body. And she moves like she has done this in every kind of dark. Doc is not loud. And she is not trying to be one of the shooters. The platoon values her for one reason that matters more than ego. She keeps them alive when plans fall apart. They trust her hands in the first critical minutes after an injury. When seconds decide if someone walks out or gets carried out, that trust is real. But it comes with a blind spot. Because they still treat her like support. Not like a voice in the tactical calls. You can see it in the little things. how they keep her centered in the file, and how someone always checks that she is still there. They warn her not to drift, not to get separated, like she might be a loose piece of gear instead of a trained operator in her own right. Nobody is being cruel. It is just habit. The way teams protect their corpsmen, because losing Doc means losing tomorrow. Rachel does not argue. She just keeps her eyes up and her breathing slow. As they reach the creek, the others watch the far bank and the shadows. But Rachel's gaze drops to the water itself. She studies the flow like it is speaking in a language she understands, tracking where the current smooths out and where it breaks around submerged rocks. Her face stays calm, but her attention is different, almost personal, like the creek is not just terrain to cross. And in that moment, you can feel she knows something the rest of them have not noticed yet. Before she ever wore a corpsman badge on her chest, Rachel Kincaid lived in open water. She was an elite distance swimmer and a rescue diver. The kind of person who learns to trust what a current is doing instead of what it looks like from shore. Moving water has patterns. Seams where it runs smooth and dark. Breaks where it churns over rock. Quiet lanes where sound dies down and footing is safer. Rachel reads those patterns the way other people read contour lines on a map. That is why this creek does not feel like just another obstacle to her. Night crossings are not only dangerous because someone might be watching. They are dangerous because the smallest mistake turns into a chain reaction. A boot slips. A body goes down. A rifle bangs rock. And suddenly the whole world knows exactly where you are. Even if no one fires a shot, the water can steal time. And time is the first thing you run out of when someone is bleeding. There is a memory she keeps locked away. A different river. A different night. And a casualty she could not reach fast enough. She remembers the cold bite, the weight of gear, and the horrible moment when she realized the water was winning. Hearing this creak brings that feeling back like a hand around her chest. Tight and sudden. Rachel swallows it, clamps down on it, and makes a quiet promise to herself that it will not happen again. As they close on the ford, the platoon tightens around Rachel like she is something fragile that cannot be replaced. A hand brushes her elbow to keep her centered in the file. And someone mouths a reminder to stay tight and not drift. It is not cruelty. It is instinct. Because every one of them has seen what happens when a corpsman goes down. Still, the message is clear. They want her safe, not heard. Rachel does not argue or roll her eyes. She checks her kit by feel, makes sure straps are flat and quiet, and keeps her light discipline like it is a reflex. While the others scan the far bank and the tree line, she keeps looking at the water, tracking where the surface smooths and where it breaks into noisy chop. She can see a cleaner line across, a darker seam that would mask sound and movement, and her fingers twitch like she wants to show it. For a second she lifts her hand, ready to signal a better path. Then she lowers it and keeps moving, because she knows no one is looking to Doc for a crossing call. The creek keeps talking, and the team keeps stepping into it. And Rachel swallows the small sting of being overlooked. Patience is easy in training, but tonight it feels like a debt coming due. The first boots hit the ford, and the creek instantly gets louder, slapping against shins and stones like it wants to betray them. Then the night cracks open from the far bank high ground. Flashes, punching through fog, and leaves as rounds snap low over the water. Someone barks contact front, and the file reacts as one body. Shoulders hunching, and carbines coming up without wasted motion. The shallow crossing that looked like a simple problem turns into a kill zone in a single breath. The platoon tries to split the danger, half of them pushing toward the far bank for cover, while the rest drop low on the near side behind roots and rocks. Return fire stays controlled. Short bursts from M4A1 carbines aimed at the only clues they have. Brief sparks of muzzle flash, and the wet shine of leaves that reflect it. The creek noise eats radio chatter, so hands start talking instead. Quick signals for shift left, hold, move. Fog and canopy swallow distance, making every shadow feel closer than it is, and every second feel longer than it should. Then a second line of fire opens from upstream, angled down the length of the ford. And suddenly the crossing becomes a funnel. It is enfilade, the worst kind, because it rakes the water where bodies have nowhere to stand tall and nowhere to disappear. Rounds stitch the surface, throwing tiny violent splashes that look harmless until you realize each one marks a miss by inches. The team in the creek is trapped between moving forward into the unknown and freezing where the water makes them easy to track. Two operators slip on submerged rocks almost at the same time, boots sliding out from under them in a way that looks slow until you hear the impact. One twists his knee and goes down hard, trying to rise and failing. His face tight with pain he cannot waste time on. Another takes shrapnel to the thigh. And even in the dim light you can see the sudden dark spill as the current pulls it away. The platoon is now split by the waterline, half committed toward the far bank and half pinned back. And the wounded are stuck in the worst place to be. Rachel Kincaid feels the old cold panic push up in her chest, but she buries it under training and focus. She watches the geometry of the fire, the way upstream rounds rake across the ford, and she hears how the creek covers sound while also trapping them in it. The knee injury will slow movement, but the thigh wound is a clock that will not stop, and she knows it before anyone has to say it. If nothing changes in the next moments, someone is going to bleed out right here in the water. Rachel's brain stops hearing the panic and starts seeing the pattern. The upstream element is raking the ford, and the far bank fire is pinning anyone who tries to stand. Which means the platoon is fighting two clocks at once. She catches quick reflections on wet leaves that betray where barrels are flashing. And she notices a darker seam in the creek where the surface smooths and the current runs tighter. That seam is quieter, darker, and harder to track. And it is the first piece of cover the water has offered them. She looks down at the wounded operator with shrapnel in his thigh and does the math without saying it out loud. He is losing blood into the creek. And if they keep trading shots like this, he will be gone before they ever reach the landing zone. A tourniquet needs seconds of focus and pressure, and those seconds do not exist in the middle of enfilade fire. So she decides to make them. Rachel moves with calm precision, grabbing the man under his kit and dragging him into the darker seam near a midstream rock that breaks the line of sight. She uses the creek noise to hide her voice, and her hands cut quick signals to the nearest teammate. Cover for 3 seconds. Then hold. The cover fire comes in tight bursts, not wild, just enough to make heads drop and give her a sliver of space. Inside her chest, the old memory of another river tries to rise. But she clamps down hard and refuses to let it take control. This is not about winning the firefight. It is about buying a pocket of time that keeps someone alive. The platoon still sees her as Doc. But in this moment, she is the one solving the problem in front of them. She is already moving to the next step, already thinking about the angle that will break the funnel and the seconds that will stop the bleeding. And, without asking permission, she commits to a move no one expects. Because survival is not waiting for a vote. Rachel spots an M4A1, carbine half submerged near a boot print in the silt, dropped in the scramble. She does not look around for approval. And she does not pretend she is suddenly someone else. She knows what she needs. A few seconds where the upstream element is not raking the ford, and a lane where her team can move without getting shredded. Her rifle is not a statement. It is a tool to open a window. She shrugs off her pack to lighten herself and keeps the carbine high, muzzle up, so the creek does not steal it. The water tugs at her legs, cold and fast. But she uses it instead of fighting it, sliding into the darker seam where the surface runs smoother and less reflective. Midstream rocks and a low boulder break the line of sight, and she uses them like stepping stones in a chess move, staying low and letting the creek noise swallow the small sounds she cannot avoid. The platoon is still locked into the funnel, but Rachel is already shifting the geometry. She rides the seam to the boulder and pauses for half a breath, waiting for the upstream flashes to show themselves again. When they do, she pops up on a counter angle the enemy is not watching and fires short. Deliberate pairs. Not spraying. Not chasing. Just disrupting. The point is not to win the fight alone. It is to force heads down and break the enfilade for a moment. The upstream fire stutters. And for the first time since the ambush began, the ford stops feeling like a straight hallway aimed at their backs. The platoon chief sees it instantly, and the team moves like it has practiced 1,000 times, bounding across in pairs, while others provide controlled cover fire. One element shifts. Another covers. Then they swap. Step by step. Using the pause Rachel bought them, the wounded man is dragged with care, kept low, protected by bodies that now move with renewed purpose instead of desperation. Shock ripples through the platoon, not because she did something flashy, but because she did exactly what was needed when no one else could. As soon as the angle is gained and the platoon starts to flow out of the ford, Rachel drops back into her real job without hesitation. Her rifle bought seconds, and now her medicine has to turn those seconds into survival. She slides back to the casualty, hands already reaching for what comes next. Steady and fast in the chaos. The creek is still roaring, but the trap has cracked, and the team finally has a way out. Rachel drops low behind the midstream rock where the current breaks, turning her body into as small a target as the creek allows. Rounds still snap and slap the water nearby, but she moves like she is on rails, fast without rushing. In her head she runs march like a quiet metronome, starting where death comes quickest. Her hands go straight to the thigh wound, because blood does not wait. She slides a tourniquet high and tight on the injured leg and pulls until the strap bites, then keeps turning until the bleeding slows and stops. The wounded operator's breathing turns sharp, but he stays with her, eyes wide and focused on her face. She checks quickly for any stubborn bleeding that the tourniquet cannot fully control, then packs and presses only where it makes sense, pushing firm pressure into the right spot and holding it. Beside her, a teammate hovers in that helpless moment between fighting and watching, and Rachel gives him something to do. Hold pressure and do not let go. Stay steady. She shifts her attention to the next steps without drama, because that is how you keep people alive. Airway is quick. A glance. A response. Breath moving. No gurgle. No collapse. Then she moves on. The creek water and night air are cold enough to make shock worse, so she drags him into a slightly drier pocket behind the rock and throws a cover layer over him as fast as her hands can manage. It is a small move, but small moves add up when the body is losing heat and time at the same time. Around them, the platoon is still in fight or flight, covering angles and shifting positions. But Rachel's calm becomes a center point. The others start orbiting. Her steady hands pull order out of chaos. One strap. One breath. One check at a time. The bleeding is controlled. The casualty is responsive. And the team finally has a person who can be moved instead of a life slipping away. When she nods that he is stable enough to go, the platoon tightens up and prepares to break out of the ford for good. Still tense, but now moving toward survival instead of loss. Once the enfilade breaks, the platoon does not linger to prove a point. They break contact the way a real team survives. By moving, not by chasing. Slipping out of the creek line and into the cover that the jungle finally offers again. The platoon chief pulls them back into shape with quick hand signals. spacing restored, security set, and every man doing a job without needing it explained. The officer in charge keeps the route in his head, pushing them toward the landing zone with the same calm urgency that got them this far. Two operators take the wounded man, not carrying him like dead weight, but moving him like a teammate they intend to bring home. They keep him low, shifting grips when the ground changes, and pausing only long enough to confirm the tourniquet is holding. Communication stays short and efficient, because the creek is behind them, but sound still carries under the canopy. A few whispered words pass close to ears. Then hands take over again, and the line keeps sliding forward through wet brush and uneven ground. As they near the landing zone, the air feels different, more open, like the trees are finally letting go. Someone preps infrared strobes, and everyone checks their spacing one more time, ready for the rush of rotor wash when the helicopter comes in. The jokes are gone now, replaced by a quiet focus that feels almost reverent. Rachel Kincaid is no longer being shepherded in the middle like cargo. She is moving with them like part of what held the whole thing together. One of the operators passes her a sip of water without a word. Just a quick tilt of the bottle and a nod that says, "Enough." Rachel takes it, wipes her mouth with the back of her glove, and goes right back to watching the casualty and the team. When the landing zone finally opens up ahead, the relief hits like a wave. Heavy and real. They are still alive, and the respect in the air is quiet and absolute. The debrief happens under harsh light that makes everyone look a little older. Wet gear sits in piles. Gloves drip onto the floor. And the room smells like river water and sweat. Nobody is trying to be funny now, because the adrenaline is gone and the reality has settled in. You can hear tired breathing in the quiet between words. The officer in charge, a lieutenant, speaks without raising his voice, calm and steady, the way leaders have to be after a bad night. He does not give a speech. He just lays out what happened and what mattered. And every operator listens. Then he says it like a simple fact. Rachel Kincaid owned that creek. And that is why we are here. The words land hard because no one argues with truth. Rachel keeps her eyes on the bandaging, checking the wrap, pressing a thumb against the edge like she is confirming it is real. Her hands are still, and for a second her face softens, like she is thinking about a different river and a different outcome. She does not soak in the praise. She just nods and goes back to work, because that is who she is. And in that small, quiet moment, you can feel she finally got there in time. Nobody survived that night because they were louder, tougher, or more aggressive. They survived because someone understood what the creek was doing and refused to let it take another life. Rachel Kincaid did not change the world with a speech. She changed it with a few seconds of calm and a choice to act when everyone else was still trying to breathe. She used the water like cover, then turned those seconds into survival with her hands. That is the part most people miss when they look at teams like this. The shooter gets the spotlight, but the backbone is often the person who stays steady when everything goes sideways. Support does not mean secondary, and quiet does not mean weak. Sometimes quiet is the most dangerous kind of competence, because it shows up without warning and it saves lives before anyone can even say thank you. The best part is that Rachel did not need applause to prove anything. The platoon saw the truth in the simplest way possible. They walked out because she made the creek stop being a trap. So, here is a question for you. Have you ever known someone who stayed underestimated until a crisis proved what they were made of?